If you've ever wondered why life feels harder than it should, why effort doesn't always equal progress, and why stability feels fragile instead of secure, this conversation explains the pattern behind it.
With more information, more tools, and more historical examples than any generation before us, have we actually gotten better? Could we possibly have gotten worse without knowing it? Because if progress has gotten better for us, shouldn't certain mistakes stop repeating? Entire civilizations have collapsed over decision-making errors we can now study in detail, and yet we still walk into the same traps as if we haven't changed at all. So the real question isn't whether people are intelligent. It's why our intelligence hasn't figured out how to make better, long-term decisions for humanity to thrive without conflict.
What's interesting is, when you zoom out, every generation thinks it's smarter than the last, right up until history repeats itself. We've optimized for convenience and speed, but we rarely stop to ask ourselves what our purpose is as a whole. We all know better enough that despite race or color, we are all still humans coexisting on this fragile planet. And trust me, I completely understand that. Since we stay divided, conflict and disagreements prevent us from achieving our true potential as intelligent beings.
That's interesting you say that, because it makes me think about how many conflicts today aren't actually new at all. Countries are still fighting over disagreements inherited from previous generations. Ideas, borders, grievances that outlived the people who created them. And it raises an uncomfortable question. If we're aware enough to recognize these patterns, why do we keep choosing to carry them forward? Especially when we know, objectively, that none of this is permanent. At any moment, forces completely outside human control, natural, cosmic, indifferent, could erase everything we argue about.
You're right. People defend these inherited positions as if they chose them, or as if they owe it to their ancestors to carry the burden forward. We talk constantly about progress, but we rarely talk about what we refuse to change. And if we're honest, the responsibility isn't isolated to one side or one nation. It's shared, which forces an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe intelligence alone isn't enough. Because if we were truly rational, we wouldn't keep repeating conflicts we already understand the cost of. That makes me wonder whether the real issue isn't ignorance, but attachment. An attachment to identity, to grievance, to conquest, almost like an addiction. Not because it leads to better outcomes, but because letting go would mean redefining who we are without the past to anchor us.
That's where it gets real. Do we enjoy this? Because letting go of the past doesn't feel like peace to most people. It feels like losing meaning. And for a lot of people, conflict isn't just something they participate in. It's something they grew up inside of. Which means the past doesn't just inform us, it scars us. Those scars get baked into cultures, institutions, even the way we define strength and loyalty. But if we really are intelligent, problem-solving beings, that raises an uncomfortable question. Why does our ingenuity stop at managing conflict instead of redirecting it? Because historically, the drive for conquest hasn't disappeared. It's just changed forms. So maybe the problem isn't that humans seek expansion. Maybe it's that we've never seriously asked where that impulse should be aimed. If that drive is inevitable, then the challenge isn't eliminating it. It's channeling it somewhere that doesn't require us to keep destroying each other.
And that's the paradox. We're capable of extraordinary coordination when survival demands it, but far less capable when meaning is what's being contested. Maybe the hardest problem humanity faces isn't technology or resources. It's governance, deciding who holds authority and which policies guide people who don't share the same history, religion, or traditions. Because once survival is no longer the immediate threat, control becomes the substitute. Different groups stop asking, "What works?" and start asking, "Who decides?" And that's where stubbornness sets in. Not because people are incapable of cooperation, but because letting go of control feels like losing identity. What's ironic is that our differences and individuality might actually be our greatest advantage. We aren't designed to think uniformly. Free will, creativity, and dissent are what allow societies to adapt. The problem isn't that humans are different. It's that we keep trying to force systems that pretend we aren't.
I've thought about this a lot, and sometimes it feels like humanity's biggest limitation is humanity itself. Not because people are evil, but because we're flawed. If you take the idea of a truly unified society seriously, it would require something almost impossible: letting go of power structures that benefit some more than others, while simultaneously building systems that don't eventually decay into corruption. And history doesn't give us many examples of that working long term. So the question isn't whether we want a perfect system. It's whether imperfect beings can sustain one without recreating the same problems under a different name.
But maybe that's the wrong benchmark. Expecting a perfect society might be the mistake. Maybe progress isn't about eliminating corruption entirely. Maybe it's about designing systems that assume corruption will happen and limit how much damage it can do when it does. That said, there might be a deeper alternative, but it's not a short-term one. It would require thinking generationally, not fixing behavior after the fact, but reshaping the conditions people grow up in, where survival isn't the defining pressure and power isn't treated as the primary reward. Because a lot of our obsession with control comes from scarcity, real or perceived. And if that's true, then corruption isn't just a moral failure. It's an adaptive response to environments built on competition for survival. The challenge is obvious, though. That kind of shift wouldn't work in isolation. It would require coordinated participation at a scale humanity has rarely achieved, and only under extreme pressure. Which brings us back to the question of whether we're capable of choosing long-term redesign without being forced into it first.
And that's the catch. Humanity doesn't usually redesign itself proactively. We adapt after failure, not before it. So the real test isn't whether this is possible. It's whether we're willing to start changing conditions before collapse makes the decision for us.
I've been thinking about a different approach, not as a solution, but as a thought experiment. What if conflict didn't decide power, but competence did? Instead of nations fighting wars to impose systems, they competed through structured challenges: economic stability, resource management, social cohesion, technological innovation, long-term planning. Policies wouldn't be inherited or enforced by conquest. They'd be earned. Each nation would put forward its best frameworks, and only the policies that demonstrably worked would shape the new system. Not one ideology winning, but the strongest elements surviving. In theory, that would allow governance to evolve through competition rather than destruction, with representation emerging from performance, not dominance. The goal wouldn't be a single culture ruling everyone. It would be a system built from what actually proves effective across different societies.
I like the idea in principle, but it assumes everyone agrees on what winning looks like. Who defines the challenges? Who decides the metrics? And what happens when a policy works short-term but creates long-term damage? Because history shows that systems don't usually fail at launch. They fail years later.
Could it fail years down the road? Maybe. Any system could. But if humanity were serious about avoiding conflict as the default, this might be one of the few alternatives worth examining. Imagine if the smartest minds from across the world came together to design a set of challenges. Not just physical ones, but tests of judgment, long-term thinking, creativity, and problem-solving. Economic resilience, social stability, ethical decision-making, cultural expression. No single nation would dominate every category, because cultures are different by design. Some societies would naturally outperform in structure and efficiency, others in innovation, adaptability, or artistic depth. And that's the point. Instead of one ideology winning through force, you'd end up with a system shaped by what different cultures do best. It wouldn't erase differences, it would preserve them. And compared to war, where culture is destroyed and history is rewritten by the victor, this at least offers a way to compete without erasing identity.
I can see the appeal, but the real test would be whether people are willing to accept losing in areas they care about most. Because cooperation is easy when you win. It's a lot harder when your values don't make the cut.
I get the sense that the world is tired of war. Not emotionally, but structurally. Every major conflict promises resolution, and almost none deliver it long term. And if we zoom out far enough, it raises a deeper question. How much time do we actually have before forces outside our control make all of this irrelevant anyway? What history keeps showing us is a repeating pattern. A powerful leader rises with what may genuinely start as good intentions. Order, stability, unity. They expand, they consolidate, they reshape the world around them, and then they die. The system collapses under its own weight, the territory fractures, and the world reverts. But not without scars. Borders are redrawn, identities are hardened, grievances are inherited by people who never chose them. The conquest fades, but the damage doesn't. And generations later, we're still dealing with the consequences of power structures that were never designed to survive the absence of the person who created them. We'll see you next time on The Sip.
If you're tired of running the same race as everyone else, if you're trying to level up, break out, build something real, or simply become the kind of person people remember, then this is where you stay tuned. Because every conversation here is built for the ones who want better, expect better, and refuse to settle for the life they were handed. And if today gave you even one thought worth holding on to, do the things that actually help this show grow. Like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe. Those 3 actions push us past the algorithm and keep this movement alive. Share this with your best friend, and go ahead, send it to your mama too. She might need this more than you think. You're tuned in to The Sip, powered by Blaze and Haze. We'll see you in the next one.